Welcome from the World Athletics office. My name is Alessio. I'm the road running manager in the competitions and events department here at World Athletics, and I'm particularly pleased to have this opportunity to open this webinar today, this road races webinar on optimism. It's our first webinar of 2021. We did have a few last year in the final part of the year, but I have to admit this one is particularly intimidating, given that we have a record number of participants online. For this reason, today we have not me doing the hosting, but we have a professional, Robb. Nevertheless, I wanted to welcome you, and I'll see you at the end for some final road running related stuff. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Alessio. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us from around the world. Delighted to have the opportunity to be hosting this World Athletics Road Racing webinar, the Optimism episode. Really excited that we have an amazing lineup of speakers, and I'll be introducing them in a moment and then introducing them to their particular segments. But in the meanwhile, why don't you introduce yourselves in the chat, just say a hello. Many of you that have joined these webinars in the past will recognize that usually it's on Microsoft Teams where you might have your camera on and your microphones on. Obviously in Zoom today, that's a little bit different. So the way to communicate is in the chat or in the Q&A. And I'll give you some more details about the Q&A when we have that opportunity a little bit later in the program. As Alessio said, record signups. We have over 400 people that have registered today. So hugely excited to have so much interest in this program. And what we're going to do is we're just going to pop a poll in to the chat, and you can just fill that in just to give us a sense of where you're from in the industry. We'll let that run for a couple of minutes while I'm introducing or announcing to you who our speakers for today will be, and then we'll publish those before we get into the next section of the program. So in a moment, I'm going to be introducing John Ridgen, the CEO of World Athletics, to give us a welcome. Once John finishes, we will come back. I will come back, and delighted to be having with us today Mr. Lim Teck Yin. He is the CEO of Sport Singapore, and I'm going to have about a 20-minute interview with Teck Yin, giving a government perspective to this Optimism edition. Once Teck Yin finishes, we'll have a 10-minute Q&A, and there's an opportunity for you during the course of Teck Yin's interview with me to be popping your questions into the Q&A. Alessio is going to be curating those, and in that 10 minutes, we'll probably be able to answer 4 or 5 of those. There is a boosting facility within the Q&A, so if you see a question you particularly like, you can upvote it, and that helps us to kind of, I guess, get the cream to the top of the questions that we really have interest in. Once we finish with Teck Yin, we'll be welcoming Mark Hurst, who is the bidding manager World Athletics, and Mark's going to be doing a presentation on the World Athletics Road Running Championships for 2023. He's going to share a short presentation on that and a wonderful video that I'm sure is going to inspire everyone. Once that finishes, we've got a fantastic rerun of one of the interviews that we had at the Mass Participation World Online Summit in October. And that's an interview that I did with Peter Burrow. Peter is the CEO and founder of an organization out of Australia called the Neuropower Group. He's a world-renowned neuroscience expert and behavioral economist. He's been working with us on the mass participation ripple effect. And the title of the discussion we had is The Greatest Human Reset Since the Ice Age, and some particular relevance to the mass participation industry. As I mentioned, we had hoped to have tonight Caroline Darcy, or sorry, I mentioned it in the green room. We had hoped and we advertised that we would have Caroline Darcy, the global head of sponsorship for Standard Chartered Bank, joining us. Unfortunately, Caroline was taken ill today, and despite trying to get one of her team to step in for her at the last minute, we weren't able to achieve that. She has, it was going to be an interview as well, and in the preparation for that, we've got a couple of really key insights from Caroline, which I'm going to share later on in the program. And then once we finish with Caroline, we'll come back for once we finish with Peter, we'll come back for a quick wrap up and the opportunity for Alessio to come back and wrap the show. Before I introduce John to do his welcome, just wanted to touch a little bit on the theme of optimism. Clearly, it's very challenging times, has been challenging times. And whilst there's no real start line in sight for many of us, a new start line, a finish line of COVID, We believe that there's a lot to be optimistic about, and I think you're going to hear a lot of that theme. We think that there's a massive opportunity where the running industry and the mass participation industry more broadly and sport more broadly is going to have a massive role to play in society. And you'll hear that, you'll hear about the health and well-being opportunities that there are. Clearly, mental health is a huge issue at the moment. Again, a huge opportunity. You'll hear Peter Burrows say that he believes that there is an opportunity for mass participation and sport to be at the very core of human existence, is the term that he uses, a vital role that he believes that we have the opportunity to play. The insight from Caroline, which is really poignant, is that she believes that post-COVID, brands will be looking for a cleaner, greener, and fairer world. And there's probably few industries better positioned to help deliver that. And she shares that she believes that there is a massive opportunity for mass participation to be on the front foot of that. Standard Chartered, many of you would recognize them as the shirt sponsor of Liverpool Football Club, those football fans, but they also have a portfolio of 10 running events, 8 marathons and 2 runs, including the Standard Chartered Singapore Marathon. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get on to introducing John. We've got about an hour and 45-minute program. Hope you can stay with us until the end. We are recording it, and we will make the recording available in about 24 hours, and you can share that with friends and rewatch. I mention again the opportunity, if you want to ask questions of TechIn, put those in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get to some of those. As I mentioned, in Microsoft, usually you're in Microsoft Teams. In this version of Zoom, there's no microphones, there's no camera, so just communicate in the chat. And with that finished in terms of housekeeping, I'm delighted now to welcome John Ridgeon, the CEO of World Athletics, to give us a welcome address. Hello, John. Welcome.
Oh, I think my microphone is now on. So excellent. Chris, thank you. Some really interesting comments you said in your introductory statements there, and I couldn't agree with them more. And look, welcome everyone to this World Athletics Road Running webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. And by the way, I love the title of this webinar, the Optimism session. And look, whilst we realize it's really, really tough out there for a lot of road race organizers, we also believe that when we get through this challenge, and we will, that this pandemic can actually be a catalyst for further growth in the sector. And I generally buy into that optimism for the future. But before I explain why, I do want to acknowledge that, you know, the stress, the difficulties, the challenges that I know many on this call are currently going through. Look, I was once chair of a mass participation events company in London, and I know that my former company is hurting very badly right now due to the revenues that have largely dried up completely over the last 12 months. So look, we understand the problems are out there, but let's, for the next hour or two at least, focus on the opportunities that will hopefully not be too many months away. So look, in terms of being optimistic about the future, I think the first point to make is because of the creation of the COVID-19 vaccines by some brilliant scientists around the world. Excuse me. It's now a matter of when, not if, we come out of the current global restrictions. And whilst I accept the virus is still raging in many parts of the world, we will sort this problem out with widespread and wide-scale vaccination. So although we don't exactly know when, it will happen, and the world will tilt back towards an axis of normality at some point, hopefully in 2021. My second point of optimism is that whilst running events have sadly largely been lost during many months of various lockdowns around the world, and of course the need for social distancing as well, people's desire to run has not diminished. Far from it. In fact, it has gone up for many people. For example, in some recent Nielsen conducted research from July of last year, but conducted across 6 continents of the world, it estimated there's some 1.4 billion people who run around the world. Now, some more regular than others, admittedly, but 1.4 billion, it's a pretty big number. And for those who run, the majority were running more often during COVID times than they normally do, particularly the occasional runners. Those, for example, who run on average 1 to 2 times a week, increased their exercise through running by over 100%. Also, in further research that ASICS conducted last year, 73% of runners intend to maintain their increased running habits post the current pandemic. Going back to the Nielsen research, they also surveyed how COVID had impacted on people's attitudes and behaviours. And across all continents of the world, 2 elements proved very strong. The majority of people want to focus more on achieving better health going forward, plus being more environmentally friendly. And we believe this is all really good news for running. As the most accessible, low cost and time effective form of exercise, running is surely one of the key solutions to these 2 big questions, to be both healthier and more environmentally friendly. And certainly using athletics to create a fitter and healthier world is something that is fundamentally important to World Athletics, and actually was a central theme in the World Athletics Strategic Plan we launched just last year, in fact. And we've backed that strategic plan up with the creation of new partnerships with, for example, the likes of Parkrun, the weekly free 5-kilometre runs that are staged in green spaces around the world. Now, in addition, as soon as it's possible to safely organise both elite and mass participation events again, these same people who have kept active through running over the last few months, we're confident will want to return to the uplifting collective experience of participating in large-scale mass events. And actually, having been starved of collective moments for far, far too long, we hope the desire to sign up and take part will in fact be even higher than before the COVID pandemic. And also for more people to perhaps be tempted to try their first event than before. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Peter Burrow from Neuro Power Group a little bit later. And hopefully Peter will be able to capture for us why running, and particularly participating in mass running races, is such a personally rewarding experience. Now, we at World Athletics are also seeing the future ambition of cities who are interested in hosting our major events embrace the concept of adding mass participation events to our existing elite championships. These mass open races for the fans and local residents will help deliver a stronger, lasting legacy of increased activity once the elite athletics show is over, and also links the community to the events in a really tangible, strong way. Mark Hurst from the World Athletics competition team will be talking a little bit later about this, with particular reference to a new championship we've created, the World Road Running Championships, which is due to be staged for the first time in 2023. And really, it's building on our existing World Half Marathon Championships by creating a whole week-long festival of running, where we also include a World 5-kilometre Championships, plus a whole series of open races for the public. And also from a race organizer's perspective, I can also confirm that we at World Athletics have received more road label race applications, some 191 to date for 2021, than in any previous year. So a big thank you to all the road race organizers for being so up for the challenge moving forward. We really do appreciate it. And post the pandemic, when our runners return to the start line of our races again, and the road running industry can perhaps be also a little bolder than before. And what I mean by this is, instead of perhaps focusing on price of entry, as we often do, instead focus more on quality of product, with the belief that a discerning customer will pay a fair price for a quality product. Also, that cities will perhaps really embrace the social benefits that our road racers bring to their cities and invest in them, rather than at times look to just tax our industry. Look, I'm really interested to hear the thoughts of Mr. Lim Tek Ying, the CEO of the hugely ambitious Sport Singapore organisation. And it will be really interesting to hear his views in terms of the attractiveness of road running to leading global cities like Singapore. And I hope he will share in the optimism for a sector that can deliver on so many fronts. So look, thank you again for everyone for joining today. We really do appreciate you being part of this webinar. Also, thank you to our speakers for making the next couple of hours as fascinating as I know it's going to be. Enjoy the session. And if I can leave you with one final message, look, yes, we know it's really tough right now, but the light is at the end of the tunnel, courtesy of the new COVID vaccines. And once we are back in the light of normality, we believe there are so many reasons to be genuinely optimistic about the future of road running. So thank you again. And I'm now looking forward to hearing from our other speakers. Chris, back to you.
Wonderful, John. Thank you so much for that. 1.4 billion runners. That's a lot of runners for us to be able to target. Fantastic statistics and some really great points that you make there. Wonderful to see you again, John. Thanks for making the time in your busy schedule. And now gives me great pleasure to welcome Mr. Lim Teck Yin, the CEO of Sport Singapore, another very busy man who's carved some of his evening out. It's now getting on for, I think, about or nearly 9 o'clock in Singapore. Hello, Teck Yin. Great to see you. Thanks for making the time.
Hi, good morning, good evening from whichever part of the world that everyone's coming from. Great to be here, and thank you very much, Chris. I want to congratulate World Athletics for really seeing the growth in running in spite of the pandemic. And I think it just speaks to the fact that athletics is a foundation sport for all of us.
Wonderful, and nice to be able to connect virtually. In 2019, in December, you and John were on the same stage at the Singapore Hilton at Mass Participation World, and hopefully it's not too long before you're back on the same stage in real life live events again. But now I think, lots of people really interested to hear a government perspective. And as John said, Singapore, a trailblazer in some of the amazing things they do as a city and in sport. And clearly, we don't need to overemphasize the fact that it's been a challenging time for sport and mass participation. But in December at the MPW online conference, you shared that it's obviously in government interest to have people active, to have citizens connecting, and you said that you felt that there was an opportunity for the mass participation industry to take the lead. And I'd like you please just to, I guess, elaborate on why that's so important for government and some practical ways that you think the industry might be able to do that, Teck Yin.
Well, we've seen through the years how participation in sport, and in particular in running, has increased in Singapore from the 2000s, where now we easily see that running and jogging is the most popular physical activity that we have in the city. It's a critical thing that we track simply because that physical activity requirement is fundamental to health and well-being. Right? I think we all know what the WHO guidelines are, and the COVID pandemic only served to heighten how important it was to get out and get physical. In most cities, in most countries, sport ultimately depends on the physical infrastructure, but running as a sport is one of those that can actually be done anytime, anywhere. And that's why I think it's such an important part of the health and wellness strategy for any city. Singapore in particular has been enjoying mass participation events, which has motivated people to keep at it. It's one thing to find some time every day to get out there for your run. It's another thing to feel motivated to do it day in, day out, doing it with friends, looking for that collective experience, as John has spoken about, provides that motivation and sustains that activity through a lifetime. And indeed, we're seeing that mass participation is for the young and for the old alike.
For the young and the old alike, absolutely. And I think with that comes one of the other points that you made is the importance of the industry staying relevant. And I guess, would love to get any insights of, relevance to government, relevant to all other sectors of society post-COVID. But from a client perspective, how does the industry stay relevant to government? How does it stay relevant to old, young? Are there any insights that you might have to share around that, please, Teck Yin?
Well, the starting point really is that we need the industry to stay creative in the way it thinks about the experiences that it is providing for runners. People like to have new experiences. That's in the very nature of human beings. And for governments in looking towards promoting sport, encouraging physical activity, that level of innovation for the experience is absolutely critical. We were delighted to see that during these difficult times that mass participation industry players were looking to see how to continue to engage their customers, engage runners in all forms of blended events. And as the city sort of opened up when the situation was kept under control, we saw various innovations that we thought were not only great for this time, but would continue to be useful to extend the reach and engagement beyond the COVID pandemic when things return to normal. So I think the mass participation industry has great reach, and as a government agency hoping to be able to reach the entire population, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I guess leading on from that, one of the things that you've spoken about and championed for a number of years now is 360-degree engagement, 365 days a year, and also this whole, I guess, element that the event is maybe the pinnacle or the culmination of a journey. And you know, we've heard lots about virtual races, and they've exploded around the world, but I'm not sure if it was you or someone else in Sport Singapore that coined the term phygital concepts, this whole blend, as you also referred to it there. Are there any examples? I mean, you alluded to the fact that there had been a number of great blended events in Singapore. Maybe for the benefit of some of the people or all of the people that are here, are there any great examples that you've seen that have really resonated in Singapore or around the world?
Well, I think that the moment the events went down the blended route, companies had a lot of latitude to think about how they could extend their events, not just go for that one big pop, but really think about engaging the runners over the months leading to that event. So the first thing we saw were events within events, right? The creation of micro races, the creation of leaderboards, the creation of different sort of groupings, whether it was a CEO run for companies, whether it was company teams racing each other, community running teams. These were micro events leading up to the main event. I think it did wonders for keeping people engaged on a single platform, but it also provided an opportunity and the runway to encourage more friends to join. With that came the opportunity then to extend beyond the local geography. And what we did see in phygital or blended events were that industry players were able to reach overseas and invite people from overseas to join, because you were no longer going to be constrained by running the physical event in country. You could encourage many people from around the world to participate. When the final event did come, we saw a mix in the Standard Chartered Singapore Marathon as an example of a blend of races being held on treadmills, races being held outdoors, an elite race, and races across and participation across many different countries. I think the Standard Chartered Bank as a sponsor looked at this and said, wow, this is absolutely fantastic. We got much better bang for the buck in sponsorship. It created an opportunity for us to reach a much wider audience. And more importantly, I think it enabled all of us to team up with our sponsors to indeed press forward with expressing aspirations for a cleaner, greener, and fairer world, as Caroline has said.
And I remember seeing some footage of you on a treadmill with was it AR or VR goggles on, and you know, that whole integration of that element of technology and the point that you also make about this connection. So you know, one of the other things that Caroline's been talking about, a portfolio of 10 events across the world, most of them in Southeast Asia, but in other parts of the world, but not really connected. So this opportunity, you spoke of collaboration, this opportunity for events within a portfolio to be working closer together, but maybe even events that would typically see themselves as competitors working together for the greater good of kind of building a bigger community, harnessing these extra runners that have come here and seeing that the more we collaborate, the more we have the opportunity to engage with people all year round. some of the examples from the Standard Chartered Marathon, you say many countries, in any sense of how the number of countries they got engaged in that blended event relative to how many people would typically come to a Standard Chartered Singapore Marathon on the first weekend of December every year?
Well, I don't have the exact number with me at the moment, but it certainly exceeded what we would have otherwise had from a travel-in point of view. And the total number of participation exceeded 100,000, which is far greater, at least double what we normally get when we run the live event. So I think the opportunities are there. I would want to add that what we also did see, obviously in the blended space, is the opportunity for the mass participation industry to work very closely with technology companies. And particularly if the technology is health promoting, I think that's where the mass participation industry really comes into its element. Because when you have an opportunity to engage 365 days a year, you begin to educate runners, not just in the artfulness of running, but really in other aspects of health habits that are important to get the total health dividend.
Again, I mean, one of the other themes that we've spoken about for some time is the commercialization of the industry. You know, some elements of the industry really struggling, working on, you know, fundamentally unsound commercial models. Your sense in the early times, you know, maybe that event as an example, that extension of the engagement with the participants, are you seeing elements of that being able to be commercialized more? Is it going to mean that because there's more engagement for brands, that there's potentially more sponsorship, there's more touch points, there's more opportunities to sell through, whether it be merchandise or training programs and so on? Are there any examples of that where that commercial model is starting to pivot away from this whole reliance on the one event at the end of the year and a few partners and entry fees? Are you starting to see some trends in that space?
Well, you know, if I sort of trace our experience with the growth of mass participation in Singapore, we reached a point where even from a Sports Singapore point of view, it no longer made sense for me to count how many mass participation events we had, because we were seeing more than 100 road runs a year, which means every weekend you're having more than one event out there. But what we did begin to see is a sense that people were getting a little bit bored and finding that one event was starting to look like another, and the industry was starting to find it a little bit difficult to try and differentiate itself. I think what the situation we've been confronted with now has provided an opportunity for mass participation industry players to think about what value they can really bring to the table, given this heightened sense of health and well-being being a very important motivator. I think it presents an opportunity for some level of consolidation in the industry. When COVID-19 first hit, we were obviously very much attuned to helping people keep their jobs, to helping companies keep afloat. And as we began to progress through 2020, we began to ask for innovation. We began to provide grants to companies who could think about digital, who could think about blended, who could think about outreach. But now as we progress through 2021, I think the time is ripe for more innovation, for some consolidation, and for companies to really think through what is their value proposition. And I think the Singapore market has an opportunity to consolidate. Companies have an opportunity to team up and join up, and I think to expand their reach to regional countries as well.
Yeah, I think that's key, is that the regionalization and the extension. I mean, certainly, I host a strength in numbers call every fortnight, and last week there was particular concerns at the moment about sponsors pulling out in the short term, but as we move beyond, there's opportunities for them to come back, but it's not going to be the same old. There's got to be some innovation in there. There's got to be other opportunities for engagement and much more of a journey for those partners along the way. And certainly that was something that Caroline spoke about, that data-driven decisions, evidence-based, rather than just, still too many people thinking it's about logos and number of people on event day, as opposed to that journey and that ongoing engagement. Tekin, I think, one of the things that must be on the mind of many of people that are on the call is, we still feel from a mass participation perspective that we sit at the back of the queue. There's increasing talk about the importance of health and well-being. Obviously, a very fine balance from a government perspective of minding the health of participants relative to COVID and ongoing infections, albeit that hopefully that's starting to minimize with the vaccines, but at the same time giving opportunities for people to be active and out there. Any sense, if you're giving advice to the industry, what are the kind of things that the industry needs to be doing to maximize the chance to get back to live events sooner rather than later?
Well, I think when you think about government's interest in the health and well-being of the citizens, it's really a multifaceted consideration, right? It's not just the health of individuals, but it's the health of the economy, it's retaining jobs, it's allowing the vast majority to carry on with their daily lives with as much normalcy as possible, and to really keep that level of optimism up. I think when we coming from sport, and I say this knowing what it means to really struggle to try and bring back all manner of sport. Well, we have people out there who are running, we're trying to increase the numbers, but team sport has suffered in a big way. And more recently, we've encouraged the industry to think about new formats within the ambit of the allowable guidelines. So what I would advise all companies in mass participation is really to continue to engage the customers who are in your database, to give them a reason to continue to participate with you. And by that, I mean you would have to provide a much stronger value proposition than the final event at the end of the day. And that's where 365 engagement really matters. And that's where some level of consolidation with different players within the value chain of the health and wellness industry would probably make a lot of sense.
Some great insights there. I think one of the things which I would love to get your insights for is, after you, we're going to be hearing from Mark Hurst, who's going to be talking about the bidding process for the 2023 World Athletics Road Running Championships. And we see, big events like World Championships, Olympics, Youth Olympics that Singapore had. And one of the things that is often spoke about, and often it's paid lip service in bidding processes and doesn't always follow through, is legacy. If you were advising, and there's people on this call that are here interested to potentially be mounting a bid, from a legacy perspective, any insights, wearing your government advisory hat now, any advice that you might be giving to people that are looking to put a bid in?
Well, first, I won't be so presumptuous to advise anybody. I think every country, every city takes into consideration its own context and decides what's the best way to consider the relevance of an event like the World Road Running Championships, what that can have and do for their city and for their country. But if I were to do this for Singapore, I think we are very interested to see what the sporting impact naturally would be beyond looking at the economics of the event. And if we think about sporting impact, it is not going to come about purely from event day or event week. It's going to come from the journey to the championships. It's going to be about how we make use of the championships, the stars, the event itself, to draw interest to wanting to learn how to run better, how to be able to sustain a healthy lifestyle. It's about learning how to enjoy running, and you usually leverage off a high-profile event to be able to market the lifestyle. I think in addition, what Blended and Phygital has told us is that when you are investing so much in a big event like this, you can leverage the stars and you can leverage technology to reach around the world. So that when you actually run the week in your city or your country, you have the world running with you at the same time. And I think that's very doable in today's context.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Teki. And I think we're pretty much out of time in terms of our chat, but we have got a number of questions that are starting to pop up there. So let's jump into those. I still had a couple of things that I'd wanted to ask you, but we've already got so many great insights. Let's give the audience the opportunity. And then if there's any time left, I'll come back to those. So one of the questions from Steve Fleck, who's tuning in from Canada, I think Toronto, if I'm right, Steve, forgive me if I've got that wrong. The physical and mental health aspects of what we do and the contributions that endurance races events make to this has been underestimated. How do we get governments more engaged in this space?
Well, Singapore, London, and Auckland, together with a new member, Stockholm, are participating in a study called Active Citizens Worldwide. We've gone through 2 years of data collection to look at the much wider impact of physical activity, sport participation, what that has on a city. Now, in our whole experience of bringing more and more cities on board, the biggest challenge for any city to come on board is with respect to how much data is available. So if there's anything I could recommend for people in the industry, it is really to think about how you're collecting data, how that data is to be shared, and how we can come together as an industry and collaborate to put that out there.
Yeah, great points. Data in so many spaces, and certainly as an industry, I think it's one of the areas that that has been massively underutilized. We have so much opt-in willingness with our participants, and that's obviously an increasing trend. But thanks for that answer, Tekian. I'm just going to look to the side because I got the screen in front of me here to read some of these off. We got Ahmed who's asking how to encourage Asian mass participation to run in smaller areas like Middle East countries. What's the best packages that we can offer to encourage them to go up there? Any thoughts in that, Tekian?
Well, you know, as I spoke about the value of hosting a high-profile event and the opportunity to engage, Singapore as a small country also looks for opportunities when our neighbors or the region is hosting a major event. How might we leverage off what they are doing, find ways to partner with them in order to be able to bring the benefit to our own corners of the world? So I do believe that, you know, we people in the industry, you know, Chris, you said it yourself, it's time not just to look at each other as competitors, but how we might collaborate. The overall pie is going to grow if we're willing to share. And so I would really encourage big property owners to think about how we might provide opportunities for others, even if they're not in our own city or country.
I think that's such a great point. The overall pie is going to grow, and certainly, you know, one of the massive positives that has come out of this has been the level of collaboration. You know, the people that we see sitting at the table who, you know, literally just a year ago would have seen themselves as arch rival competitors, now sharing operational plans and all manner of information and data in the hope of getting the industry back. And I guess my big hope is that that continues afterwards, that, you know, once we get back and we get over this, as we undoubtedly will, that there's still this desire to work together and build the pie and build the industry and impact the lives of hundreds of millions of people as we can. We have one here now. I'm not sure you can answer this, put you on the spot a little bit. We have a group of 50 to 70 runners from the USA that is committed to the 2021 Singapore Marathon. Has a decision been made as to what dates and times that event will be held? Saturday night, Sunday morning. How's your crystal ball looking there?
Well, we certainly have intentions to run it in December. That's the first point I would make. You know, we want to go live, and we're planning to go live, right? I believe that Ironman has announced the date in December, which traditionally is the first weekend in December. We are asking ourselves whether this year will be an important year for us to continue our journey toward the World Marathon Majors. But it's going to very much mean that we would have to track the milestones that we will have to arrive at in order to take a decision. And one of the big milestones has got to be the vaccination program. One of the big milestones is going to be what risks continue to exist as we open ourselves up to the world. As you know, I think Singapore as an international hub, a global city, cannot afford to close its borders, and we have been very selectively and carefully reopening our borders to different travelers coming into the country. So we will manage that in tune with the national profile, but we're certainly looking towards making key decisions based on certain key milestones. And the vaccination program is going to be a very important one.
Thanks, Teck Yin. So that question on the lips of people all over the world, I'm sure, and hopefully we're going to all be together in Singapore in December to see another great event. I think we've got time probably for one more. This is a fairly long question here, so bear with me. Stephen Granger, we have seen in South Africa that the lifting of strict COVID-related lockdowns saw a flood of people seeking out beautiful and nature-rich places to run, cycle, walk, or simply be. How are road and trail race organizers and administrators of the sport responding to and preparing for this health-related growth in the sport? What new opportunities exist in Singapore to satisfy and excite those seeking competition, organized recreation, and social interaction in both COVID recovering and post-COVID world?
Well, that's a long question, and I'm trying to grasp the essence of what is being asked. You know, we're very much a built-up city, and we greatly treasure whatever little green spaces we have. And the National Parks Board in Singapore has done a great job to link the green spaces in Singapore and create a connector network which spans more than 300 kilometers. We have seen in this COVID times that people flock to these green spaces precisely because it does provide respite, and it does have its sense of supporting one's mental health. And what we do want to see is how the industry could be working with everybody to help people understand and appreciate what they would get from getting out to nature and participating in runs with friends, with families, and indeed in larger communities as we begin to open up. So I think industry has a role to play in helping people move beyond just casual exercising to becoming more purposeful with their efforts to get healthier.
Thanks, Teck Yin. Certainly, Singapore a trailblazer in that space. So I think we don't have any more questions in the chat, but I'd love to pick up one, which was a bit of a discussion with myself and Alessio, and a comment that you made also at the online summit in October about a vision to work with Southeast Asian countries, with governments in Southeast Asian countries to impact the health and well-being of millions of people. And the kind of question from Alessio was kind of what's the secret sauce for that? How do governments, I mean, Singapore has gone so far down the track, but there's other governments, you know, not only in Southeast Asia, but other emerging countries that are starting to move down that path. What's the mix of government leadership, private government partnerships, you know, just a quick probably wrap up of some insights that might be useful to those that are on this call in emerging countries, and we have a lot of them that want to pursue this post-COVID mass participation journey and sports journey.
Well, just speaking for Singapore, we have been trying to encourage our Southeast Asian friends to join us on the Active Citizens Worldwide project. As I shared earlier on, it's a project that seeks to take data and put them into models to help us understand the real impact that physical activity and sport is having on our country. Everything from crime prevention to health prevention, or rather illness prevention and social compact building. But I think, you know, as illustrated by Standard Chartered Bank, it's important that we can also leverage on the multinationals that really cross borders and begin to build a common narrative across countries. The private sector, particularly multinationals, have a very big role in being able to set that tone, to be able to invest in the countries that they operate in, and to be able to enable governments indeed to come together, even as governments enable them to operate across borders. And I think that partnership is going to be increasingly important between government and multinationals in working together.
So I think, you know, that final point, so critical: collaboration, partnerships across and within the industry, beyond the industry, governments, brands, corporations, wonderful opportunities which you've highlighted for our industry to play a pivotal role. Thank you so much again, Teck Yin, for making the time. Great to see you again, and have a good night. I think it's getting on for 9:30 your time. Rest well, and thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Well, big thanks again there to Mr. Lim Teck Yin, the CEO of Sports Singapore. And next we move over to Monaco, where we welcome Mark Hurst, who, as I mentioned at the top of the show, is the bidding manager for World Athletics. Mark is going to do a presentation on the World Athletics Road Running Championships for 2023, for which the bidding is now in process. Welcome, Mark. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Lim Teck Yin. Just give me a second. I'll share the screen here. Hey folks, we're delighted to talk to you today about the evolution of the World Half Marathon Championships into the World Road Running Championships. What's new about this event, and why might this be interesting for you, your organization, or city? So we're World Athletics. As John mentioned, in June last year, we published our 4-year strategic plan for growth with a new vision for the organization to use the power and accessibility of athletics and our athletes to create a healthier and fitter world. We plan to realize this vision through our World Championship events, and we're committed to inspiring spectators by seeing the world's best athletes up close and personal, encouraging participation through amateur races, fun runs, and other outreach programs, and developing a lasting road running legacy and culture in your host city that extends way beyond the race week. So when it comes to our events, our crown jewels are the World Athletics Series. These include 7 of the highest profile global championships in our sport. Each event is carefully curated to bring unique experiences to life, to help race organizers and host cities to achieve identified goals. We have the network and capacity to upscale any international competition into a truly global one, attracting the world's best athletes and millions of fans, both in person and across all digital platforms. Today, we're going to hone in on the Road Running Championships as the event property that is likely to be most relevant to those listening. But feel free to consider our other World Championship events, which we're also currently adapting in order to achieve your identified goals in a slightly nuanced manner. As I mentioned on the first slide, the Road Running Championships has evolved from the Half Marathon Championships, where the world's best runners have for years gathered to determine who's the fastest, where world records are often broken and where legends of the sport emerge. I get wrist-dead butterflies of excitement every time I watch that video. There are many great road races that span the world, but there's only one World Championships, and it takes place just once every 2 years. This is the race that all runners want to win. This is the race that all the media want to capture. And this is the race that all levels of runners and spectators want to be part of. The World Half Marathon Championships is one of our most successful and sought after World Athletic Series events. But we wanted to dream bigger and expand it to create an even more attractive value proposition for race organizers. Hence, the World Road Running Championships was born. The first edition, which is currently open to candidates, will take place in 2023, and it proposes to be a week-long festival of running and events, including not 2, but 4 World Championship races, men's and women's half marathon and men's and women's 5-kilometer races, as well as some prospect to add more official championship races, such as the 1 mile World Championships and a Masters World Cup. The Road Running Championships is more than just elite competition and medals. It offers a feast of additional opportunities for organizers and host cities, namely the exclusive right to host the Global Running Conference, the world's premier gathering of all things running, including product lunches, fireside chats, panel discussions with thought leaders across the industry, including past and present legends of the sport, medical experts, data scientists, and tech startups. The opportunity to organize an official road running health and fitness expo for both the endurance and lifestyle sports industry, outreach programs with custom-made training sessions that can be rolled out locally and nationally through running clubs and communities. World Athletics will contribute through its network and expertise by facilitating access to athletes and designing programs tailored to meet the needs of the host, such as corporate relays and school competitions. The Park Run Global Festival will also offer free and accessible community fun runs in the host city in the week of the event. Organizations, staff, and volunteers will have the opportunity to upskill their sporting event experience with access to the World Athletics e-learning platform, offering sport and event-related education tools. Not to mention running clinics, injury prevention seminars, coaching courses, and much more may be tied into the event. Let's now consider how organizers might generate revenues from the Road Running Championships. Firstly, through the race directly, including national sponsorship, merchandise, concession revenues, commercial hospitality, and also local hotel commissions. And secondly, through the additional events mentioned, including global conference admission fees for both physical and virtual attendees, mass participation registration fees, health and fitness expo floor space, and running clinic fees. So the length of the event is at the organizer's discretion, but our data suggests that most hosts prefer to prolong the World Championships experience over the course of a week, with promotions and legacies extending far beyond this. We've prepared a brief indicative schedule of what this week-long festival of running could look like, building momentum with the Global Park Run Festival, outreach programs, and Health and Fitness Expo, leading into the Global Running Conference, and all in anticipation of the World Championship races, split over Saturday and Sunday. In terms of budget for hosting the event, the ballpark figure is between $2 to $2.5 million, based on the Half Marathon Championships in Valencia 2018, and taking into consideration this new format. Budgets will obviously vary on a case-by-case basis, depending on the cost of living in the host city and the strength of the commercial program, which can help offset costs through in-kind sponsorships. Let's now consider the overarching benefits to the host city and return on investment. Firstly, economic benefits. The total direct economic impact of the Half Marathon Championships in Valencia 2018 was over $6 million. There were around 28,000 spectators that turned out for that race, of which around 4,500 were out-of-town visitors. There were also around 14,000 amateur runners that took part in that race, of which 6,500 were out-of-town visitors. Secondly, social benefits. Given the increased awareness of running benefits to both physical and mental health, the Road Running Championships might be the perfect catalyst to promote health and fitness and well-being to any level of runner or spectator in your host city. At the Half Marathon Championships in Copenhagen 2014, around 4,000 recreational runners ran their first ever half marathon. Around 1,000 runners joined running clubs before the race, and over 1,800 runners joined running clubs after the race. Now, if we consider what might feel like growing division in our society today, the Road Running Championships has a proven track record for building closer communities and generating civic pride, as well as encouraging greater diversity and inclusion. At the Half Marathon Championships in Valencia 2018, 93% of local residents agreed that hosting the World Championships had a positive impact on the host city's community. One of the most beautiful things about the event is complete gender balance on the field of play, with equal prize money for men and women. The Road Running Championships is genuinely an event for the entire family, with fans comprising of 52% women and 48% men. Thirdly, environmental benefits. In recognition of the environmental challenges faced by cities today and the growing scrutiny under which the event industry is placed, World Athletics will work with organizers to implement a sustainable management system to demonstrate internal and external stakeholders a walk the talk commitment to sustainability. World Athletics has a particular focus on air quality, and a study at the Half Marathon Championships in Gdynia last year revealed the best air quality of any major athletics event or road race measured since our air quality project started. Now, by publishing these results, we hope to encourage all stakeholders to become more conscious on air quality and the impact on both health and performance. Fourthly, image and reputation benefits. The event coverage incorporates over 200 media accreditations. The World Championships race will be broadcast in some form in every country in the world. In Valencia 2018, there were more than 1.2 million viewers, and with the addition of the 5-kilometer World Championships races, this will likely increase viewing at an exponential rate. Social media figures for that race include over 8 million impressions, 1.1 million video views, and over 500,000 on engagement. Now, this global media reach and profile can create a huge boost for existing races or even help launch new ones. For past hosts, Copenhagen and Valencia, annual participation numbers increased on average 26% from the year after hosting the Half Marathon Championships. So if any of this presentation has struck a chord and made you more interested in hosting the Road Running Championships, let's briefly consider the next steps in the process. In December, we launched the Road Running Championships 2023 edition, where we made available a bid guide providing information in line with the content presented today. So if you missed anything in the presentation, please check out the bid guide available on our website. We also released a pre-qualification form, and this replaces the former expression of interest letter to give a more objective form of initial assessment. The 1st of March 2021 is the submission deadline for the pre-qualification form, so just under a month to apply if interested in hosting this 2023 edition. In March, we will share a bid application form with those qualified candidates, and we're looking forward to make this bid process a more collaborative experience with candidates through bid workshops and virtual meetings. The 1st of June 2021 is then the submission deadline for the bid application form. Finally, to answer some frequently asked questions, March, April, and October are the preferred months in our global calendar for this event. There are no hosting fees, but there are mandatory fees payable by the organizer relating to accreditation, event presentation, host broadcaster, video recording, and prize money, all included in the indicative budget of between $2 to $2.5 million. And there's equal prize money for men and women, which is around $250,000 in total for all 4 World Championship races. So that's all we have time for today, but if you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to get in touch. You can reach us on bidding@worldathletics.org, or you can contact me directly on mark.hurst@worldathletics.org. Happy to discuss the Road Running Championships, additional opportunities, and bidding process in more detail, as well as any other World Athletics Series events. So stay safe, healthy, and fit. Happy running, everyone.
Much, Mark. Wonderful presentation and really inspiring video, and hopefully that's inspired plenty of people. I see quite a few questions in the chat there, predominantly people asking for a copy of the presentation. I think just to reiterate those email addresses, contact Mark directly, mark.hurst, H-U-S-T, @worldathletics.org, or bidding@worldathletics.org, and I'll ask Alessio or Mark to put those in the chat for you as well. There's also a few questions popping up about the recording. Yes, we are recording, and we will send a link to everybody who registered. So even those who didn't make it will get a link to be able to watch the recording. We should get that out within the next 24 hours. Some great insights there from Mark. Seems like a wonderful opportunity. Broadcast in every country in the world. That was one of the statistics that really stood out to me when we were doing our rehearsal yesterday. And some great insights to leave some legacy, to bring your partners, commercial partners together. So yeah, I think some wonderful opportunities with the new innovations and changes that have been made. And hopefully many of you will get on board with getting involved in that bid process. Thanks so much, Mark. Enjoy the rest of your day there. And now we're going to move on. And as I mentioned, what we should have been doing was having a recorded interview with Caroline Darcy, the global head of sponsorship and events for Standard Chartered Bank. As I mentioned earlier in the show, Standard Chartered, the shirt sponsor of Liverpool Football Club, and also a portfolio of 10 running events around the world. The Singapore Marathon, which some of you may be aware is in the process of bidding to become the next world marathon major, an amazing event down there in Singapore, which I would thoroughly recommend to anybody looking for an incredible experience. You heard some insights from Mr. Lim Teck Yen, a beautiful city with so much greenery and an amazing culture. Unfortunately, as I say, Caroline wasn't able to make it. We do hope that we will be able to bring her to you at a later stage, but a couple of probably 3 key insights that she wanted me to share with you that we were planning to talk about. And I'm going to read off my notes if you'll excuse me. And this is a particular pertinent comment, I believe, for our industry that she made when she was on a panel at the MPW Online Summit in October. She said, "I think there will be a pivot in the way that we work with our partners, even down to the way that contracts are drawn up. It will be to the health and well-being of the world. When we think about the way the world is going to recover post-COVID, it needs to be a cleaner, greener, and fairer world." And as I said earlier as well, when I mentioned that the end of that, I think as an industry, running industry or mass participation industry generally, we are incredibly well positioned to be able to deliver on all 3 of those objectives. She goes on to say, "I think there is a massive opportunity for mass participation events who have access to vast numbers of people to try and get on the front foot and work with brands to find ways to help them achieve their business objectives. For example, Standard Chartered Bank is a signatory to the Paris Climate Accord, and sustainability is central to our overarching business objectives. There is a duty of care. Governments are putting their hands up. The United Nations, organizations, and so on are saying we are going to work together. The challenge I give to mass participation is, can you sit down and say, what can we create to help someone like Standard Chartered dial up its sustainability narrative? So there's a challenge. She went on to say, I don't have all of the answers, but I believe that this is a massive opportunity. And it's a story that I hear in conversation with many brands, that properties, platforms, as they sometimes refer to in the broader sense, don't always come to them with a clear understanding of what their business objective is, helping them achieve their overarching business objectives. There's a great clue and a great opportunity. And then the final point, which probably comes as no surprise, and there were a number of other points, but we'll leave those for another day, but evidence-based and data-driven strategies are now a key element of every partnership. And you heard it in Mr. Lim Teck Yen's interview, that importance of us as an industry starting to gather data, both industry-wide and as individual events, being able to go to potential partners with data that clearly addresses how it might relate to their customer journey, and their sales funnels. So a few insights from Caroline. As I say, I hope that there will be an opportunity to bring Caroline to you. We will certainly work on that and work with World Athletics to make that opportunity happen at some stage later, or possibly through the Mass Participation World platform. I'm now going to move on to our final segment before the close, and this is a fascinating one. We had so much amazing feedback from it. It's a slightly edited version of an interview that I did with Peter Burrow at our MPW Online Summit in October. It's titled The Greatest Human Reset Since the Ice Age, and that's a pretty bold title, and I think you'll find that in many ways it lives up to its billing. Peter is the founder and CEO of the Neuropower Group based out of Australia. He's the author of 6 books. He's globally recognized as a neuroscience and behavioral economics expert. And many of you would have hopefully seen, and if you haven't seen, please feel free to contact me if you'd like a copy of it. We've been working on a project called the Mass Participation Ripple Effect. And Peter is our research partner. Peter and his team in Australia is our research partner. And we've had support from the Professional Triathletes Organization. The results are absolutely astounding, way beyond our wildest dreams of what we felt that the ripple impact of people participating in a mass participation event. And just to give you a quick snapshot, when I first sat down with Peter a number of years ago, we used the Singapore Marathon as an example. 50,000 participants, 10,000 of them coming in internationally with an economic impact of maybe 3.5 room nights on average, maybe tens of millions of dollars worth of economic impact. 40,000 Singaporeans becoming more active. And Peter at that stage felt that the ripple effect, we would be able to prove that the ripple effect would go 10 people wide. So 40,000 runners, 400,000 people directly impacted, or indirectly and directly impacted. After 3 months of desktop research and the release of the white paper, it appears, based on research in a number of other parallel areas, that there's actually a compounding effect. So a person running would have an immediate circle of 6 people, and each of those 6 people would have a circle of 6 people, and that ripple would go 6 deep, with a compounding effect, with potentially an event like the Singapore Marathon impacting the health and well-being of millions of people. The next phase of this that we're working into now and in the process of locking down the final funding for will be to go through a year-long research project to actually prove these points now. And even if we don't get all the way to that compounded effect that the desktop research shows, the reality is, and Steve Fleck referred to it in his question, that we have a massive health and well-being impact on communities. And what you hear Peter say now, and there's some amazing insights, and I've already let out the bag one of them, that he believes we as an industry have the opportunity to be at the very core of humanity as we move forward from COVID. So sit back, relax. It's about a 25-minute interview, some incredible insights in terms of the potential of the industry. I'll be back on the other side to give a quick wrap and hand back to Alessio to wrap up the show. Enjoy the next 25 minutes. I'm super excited about this. The greatest human reset since the Ice Age. That's a pretty big statement, and certainly it's got a few people's attention already. What does that mean to the mass participation industry?
Well, what it's really saying is that never before have we had this much of a reset. And it's interesting to ask the question, what is it that enables societies to develop and grow and change? And what is it that holds them still? What is it that holds them in homeostasis? Why is it that you can have change of government, you can have change of policy, you can have massive shifts, yet so little changes? And it's part of a big piece of research that was done by a Canadian researcher, Naomi Klein, and she looked at how is it that the Chicago School of Economics could have such a disproportionately huge impact internationally. It doesn't matter what Milton Friedman and his work really means. What's most important is that she focused in on what enables societies to make fundamental shifts. And the answer is this: when you stop everything, when it's not just your piece of the jigsaw that stops. It's not just, if you have a natural disaster, let's say you have a cyclone or an earthquake or a tsunami, then that part of the country is stopped. If you have a particularly good event happen, change of government, for example, and let's say a change of government positively funds mass participation, that's just one tiny tile in an overall mosaic. Now, if you have a dictator that comes into a country and stops everything and re-centralizes everything, if you have something like COVID-19, everything stops. Everything is halted, and everyone, everywhere, is being reset. This is the sort of change that you won't find anywhere else, certainly in the last 100 years, where everything stops. It is an opportunity to reset, not so much now that things are stopped, but as we start to move from one homeostasis to the next, when we make that shift, it's just as hard to try something new as to do something that you used to do. So now there's this opportunity, there's this gap. And in that moment, you can reset the role of mass participation. And in fact, what will happen after a reset like this, it's almost like, you know, when all else fails, you turn the computer off and you start it again, and it resets and it refreshes, and some of the quirks and the things that weren't working very well are all fixed. This is exactly the opportunity that mass participation has now, because when it resets, there will be winners and losers. And the winners will be the ones that can get their collaborative effort together. There's a great writer who wrote the book Anti-Fragile, Nassim Taleb. And his book called Anti-Fragile is really about this idea that your genetic line, your gene pool, is here as a result, not because you're able to survive in the good times, but because your forebears, your ancestors, survived in the bad times. Then extends that and says, companies that have lasted a couple of 100 years are there because they did well in the bad times. And his term that he uses, which is anti-fragile, is this idea that if you've got an industry or a sector or a company that's fragile, then what you have to do is treat it very, very carefully, because otherwise it disintegrates or it's damaged. If you've got something that is robust, it means that even though you may treat it badly, it will survive. But then he says there are companies and individuals and movements that the harder they're treated, the more strength and the more resilience and the stronger they are. So if you were to have something that was anti-fragile and you were to send it through the postal system, it would say, treat this package badly, shake it, because the worse you treat it, the stronger it will get. Now, why is that relevant? Because he would say organisations that are anti-fragile come through these big seismic shifts in very different places, much, much stronger. And so here's an opportunity for us to look at, well, what is it that makes some organisations anti-fragile? What is it that makes some movements anti-fragile? And what is it that makes others very, very fragile? Because at the end of this, there will be things that we've done for the last 100 years that we will never do again. And there will be things that were of medium importance, which we can now turn up to maximum importance. And I think there are some great trends that you can jump on the back of to be able to ride that way. Potentially, at the end of this process, if you can collaborate and work together, it's not just about doubling the size of mass participation as a sector, but you might be able to multiply it by up to 10, because the success of working together in a collaborative way, of resetting that, and the success looks phenomenal. And after the event, it's like you can't imagine it any other way. So I know that's a big introduction, but there's a thought. We've got to reset. And what holds things from ever being really reset is these complex networks. Some of them are strong, some of them are weak. Now all of them are being reset So now we can take ground from areas that historically we could never have taken ground. It's a huge opportunity for this sector, huge.
So coming back to the collaboration part of it, I mean, what do you see, you know, from a neuroscience perspective? What are the key things that this industry needs to bear in mind? We've now got this, we're all working together. Is there a risk now that, you know, COVID goes, let's assume however COVID goes, in a year's time, suddenly we all start becoming competitive again? How does that work from a neuroscience perspective?
What tends to happen is every sector sets guardrails and they're enabling constraints. And the human brain likes enabling constraints. It's designed. You know, music itself isn't random. Music has enabling constraints, which are the rules of music: rhythm, pace, what is harmony, what's an augmented chord, what's a diminished chord. And in the same way, sectors run. If you as a consultant, we work across different sectors. The health sector has fundamentally different rules than the finance sector or the rail sector. So when you move from one bubble to another bubble, they're not all the same rules. What is acceptable in financial services may not be acceptable in health or acceptable in schools. So the first thought is, what are the rules that we want to have as our enabling constraints that are going to drive this sector to have much bigger influence, much bigger impact for societies, for individuals, and for groups and families and tribes moving forward? And so it's about that collaboration that you're talking about. It's about how do we get people to now be thinking overall as a team rather than thinking individually, rather than just thinking me, my function, my organisation. How do we think sector-wide? And if at the end of this, if the lag indicator, the calling card of COVID is that as a sector, you learn how to have genuine collaboration, that will make you anti-fragile. And there are going to be plenty more of these viruses and international crises moving forward. What you're describing might be how you've been in the past, but if you're actually drawing together, that's the first sign of an anti-fragile movement. And that will be so powerful. You'll come out of this and suddenly you won't be able to work out, why is it that this is so different than it was in the past? And it will be because of the relationships. So there are three things that draw you together. One is the quality of the relationships. Relationships are a function of trust and psychological safety. So it's about how do we have rules that we're all prepared to play to. And if members of your group don't play to those rules, you need to have consequences. You need to have some governing body that's able to say, well, if you don't play to those rules, you don't play as part of this community. As human beings, and my specialty is in neuroscience, my interest is not just neuroscience though, it is what's the impact of the way other people impact us. In other words, what's the social neuroscience component? So neuroscience, you've got the individual, and so how does my brain read? How do I interact with people? What is fear based on? This is looking at the individual brain. But my particular interest and specialty is looking at the social brain. What happens when a highly dysfunctional person goes into a highly functional group of people and suddenly is highly functional? Or what happens when a highly functional person now goes into a dysfunctional environment and now is dysfunctional? What we know from psychology is very rarely do you end up with one individual in a family who is psychologically unwell. It's a system. And so if you've got if we've got so many people suffering from depression and anxiety, we've got a whole generation now with the highest levels of suicide ever seen. What's our antidote to that? And part of the answer is that as human beings, we're quite different from artificial intelligence. We're quite different from machines. And one of the trends that I've seen internationally is that more and more we're wanting to treat people like machines, and we're wanting to treat machines like people. So we keep wanting machines to care. We keep wanting machines to give a damn, to create meaning, right? And then we want people to just get on with it and do their job. Much better strategy is to have people as people and machines as machines. Machines are individual. They think individually, they work individually, they don't need large groups of people. We are tribal, we're herd animals. So we need people in the herd. And mass participation is the exact example of herd. It's about where you work with a group of people. And even if you've got a competition and you've got individuals competing, those individuals are supported by their herd, by their tribe. And so you have tribes within tribes. This is very human. Mass participation is a classic example. You wouldn't get a whole bunch of robots wanting to do mass participation activities. It isn't in their nature. It is in the human being's nature. And so, place I would start, what are our enabling constraints and how can we go into this whole thing thinking our objective is to multiply the size of the sector by 10. That's what we want to be doing. We want to be pitching high. We know that if you go into a tackle and you expect that you're not going to walk on the other side, then you're not going to be successful in the tackle. You want to go in there wanting to absolutely succeed. And even if you focus all your discussion on how can we increase the size of the sector by 10 and you multiply it by 5, that's 5 times, not how are we going to survive through this? That's not an anti-fragile approach. It's what is the strength of the relationship we need so that we can start to reposition ourselves in a way that is genuinely human. So the first is the quality of the relationships, and we need to work more on that. The second is the quality of the information. How do we share information? How do we share it with each other? How do we share it in an accurate way? And how do we work together to really understand the dynamics of the system that we live in? And the third is identity. And so we need to have this sense of an overall identity of the sector, not just everybody competing. We want to take it to that next step. And a high tide rises all ships. If you multiply the size of the sector by 5 or 10, then every participation, all those different activities will all increase in size. But if we now, as governments lose the faith and people get confused about whether or not mass participation is a good or a bad thing, and everybody becomes very tactical, if we're not careful, we're going to end up with neighbourhood runs. It's going to end up being a very, very small, fragmented sector. And then we start competing with each other for the same $15 rather than working with each other for 15 million, or internationally, the sky's the limit, because it speaks to what it is to be fundamentally human. And so part of what I was keen to share with you today was, from a neuroscience perspective, from a brain science perspective, if there are 6 key levers that you can pull, where should you be focusing your attention so that you do come out the other end of this as being an anti-fragile sector? Because then no matter what is down the track, as these, and you see this incidentally with some family businesses are resilient. In other words, the family has deep pockets. And so when things get really tricky, they just dig deeper. Well, they're resilient. We're not talking about resilience. We're talking about anti-fragility, which incidentally on the body is one of the lag indicators of health and fitness. If you're fragile, then it means the slightest cold, the slightest flu, the slightest drama, unbalances you. When you're genuinely fit, then as you go through the pain of exercise and through the discipline of pushing yourself and you apply those disciplines, that's a classic example of your body becoming anti-fragile. And I'm saying, rather than wrapping ourselves up in cotton wool, rather than using all our energy to fight each other, let's work together to create this anti-fragile sector. That's why I'm excited about it, because I genuinely believe that this sector will be one of the winners on the other side of this pandemic.
And from an organization perspective, there's this, my sense still that the industry is very much, how can we fit what we've got into, or what we've been doing into the new normal. We keep talking about the new normal, and that was why I selected the theme here of a blank canvas, because I think we have to be bold. We have to have this opportunity to say, you know, what does the future look like? Start looking ahead, because it's never going to be the same again, is it? I mean,
everybody wants to know what the future is going to look like. Everybody wants to know whether or not our different economies are going to grow or scale back, and the dynamic between, you know, the East and the West, and what's going to happen with the EU and the UK. I genuinely believe it's too early to tell. We don't know. But what's going to happen is organisations and sectors that don't pull together will simply lose out to those that do, because there's only so much resource. And so if you fragment, it's going to take, you know, and when I look at estimates, people are saying it will take up to 10 years just to get back to where you were. Now, the question is, the money's still going to be circulating around. The energy's still going to be there. There's still going to be a lot happening. But where is it going? And the answer is, those that pull together that are anti-fragile will take the resource. They'll take the energy. And so that's our task. Our task is, how do we work on the nature of the dynamics of the organisation so that no matter what opportunities, whatever changes ahead, you're there to be able to take advantage of it. And there could be all sorts of different swings and directions moving forward. But if you can work together on it, it's a bit like, can we predict exactly what this track is going to be like? Well, you don't. If you're fit and you're healthy, it doesn't matter what's ahead of you. If you have to swim, you can swim. If you have to run, you can run. If you have to cycle, you can cycle. Let's not obsess on analysing every step of the way in the road. Let's work on getting you game ready. Let's focus on you being fit as a sector. And so that's why what I look at is, what is the thirst? Human beings have a thirst now to celebrate what it is to be human. Whereas before we were defensive, saying we don't want to lose our jobs to AI and robots, it feels to me like internationally there's a shift. Now people are asking the question, well, what is it to be human? What does that mean to be human? And what are the components of that? And what is it that I actually enjoy? And what do I get meaning from? And you guys, I mean, this whole sector lines up beautifully with every piece of that. You're 100% aligned with what it is to be human. So if you can create an anti-fragile movement, an anti-fragile sector, you will grow, because others will become far less relevant.
You know, it's inevitable that, you know, we're going to lose some of the weaker ones, for want of a better expression. There's going to be succession, there's going to be new people, but for the people that are going to remain and stay, what are some of the kind of mindset approaches they have to take to weather this storm?
So when you recreate, the brain starts in a very structured way. And the first thing the brain asks is, what's the point? What's the point? So how good are you as a sector at articulating your value proposition? You know, one of the things that I find fascinating is that people often in organisations and, you know, in particularly in corporates where they don't have a particularly good value proposition, they spend a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to nut out how they can sell to their consumers. And if you were to think of an organisation or a sector that is actually very bad for your health, think of cigarettes. Look at the amount of money that they've spent working out their value proposition. And they've linked it back to a core belief, which is freedom. You know, this is by smoking, this is your independence, and it's your commitment to that independence, right? So it's this, and it's your freedom of choice. So the place I would start is, what is the value proposition of this sector? And if it's, well, it's fun, I think you're missing a lot of the value proposition. It's fun, it leads to health, it leads to mental health, into group bonds, into family bonds, into team bonds, into tribal bonds. One of the key areas here is to look at aspirational values. People often say, if you've got an organisation, you've got people, you know, we worked very closely with Emirates Airlines, where they looked at how do we bring together 140 different countries from right around the world? How, do we all have the same values? And the answer is, well, we may not have the same values from our past, but we can have the same aspirational values for our future self. And so what are the aspirational values that right across the sector everybody wants? Everybody wants to be valued. You want to enjoy your own physical health. You want to enjoy a lifestyle and a wellness. You want your health span to equal your lifespan. So just being alive is the booby prize, right? You want to be healthy for the whole time. But you also want to be able to live in a city and in a part of the world that is wonderful and that is enjoyable. And there's so much, rather than just counting up Uber fares, taxi fares, hotel rooms, right? There's a much bigger sell that I think the sector can get much better at being able to articulate. I think that's really important. So that's the place to start. How can you bring together all these different elements and not just think of it as your individual sector? How does it link into mental health? We've got this mental health, we've got a massive problem with mental health right across the world right now, particularly with our young people. So how can we be making some relational bridges between what you do and mental health, between what you do and education, between what you do, and not just linear things like you've got a sponsorship from Nike or a sponsorship, right? What about some non-linear links so that you're not seen as an event or a thing, you're seen as being core to the human experience. What you help define is the human experience. You're the DNA of the human experience. You're not the whole DNA, but you are a critical part of it. And that's aspirational. So that's the aspirational values. So part of that is to spend time, and you've got the information. We talk about research, but you're actually a very diverse group. So just by being able to have that information flow through relationships and ask the question, well, what are our aspirational values and the aspirational values of everybody who's involved, and how can we underpin that? That is a really good place to start.
But such a wonderful discussion. I think we got 2 minutes before we got to wrap up. Something closing that you'd like to say, Peter?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I think if I was to say 3 bits of advice, think sector and think value and think outside what you've always done in the past. You want to be at the very core. You've always been a bolt-on. Yeah. Don't be a bolt-on. Be at the very center of it and work out how others can fan out from you. That'll be the first piece. The second would be think big, don't think survival. Don't think how are we going to get through the next 10 years. Turn it around and think how could we be 10 times the size? And then the final point would be thinking it through, move from individual heroes to tribes and cross-functional tribes. So the hero might be a town or a region or a school or an environment or a community, but how can we move the focus from an individual focus to a group focus? Now, do this, and we've talked a lot about value proposition, but when the reset happens, the winners are the ones that can link value proposition and benefit. And the broader the benefit appeal, the more powerful you'll end up being at the end of the process. Now, once you're down the other end, everybody will take credit for it, but it's right now, it's when things are bleakest and everybody's focusing on survival, this is when it's reset. And in 100 years' time, people won't be able to work out how is it that it was any other way. But here's our moment. Let's reset the sector.
Wonderful, Peter.
That's the big idea.
So great to catch up as always. Really appreciate your time and look forward to catching up again soon. Thanks so much. Many great insights for the group to take away. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Cheers.
Cheers. Well, thanks to those of you that have stayed with us the journey. Hopefully that was well worth staying for. So many great insights, as I said there at the end. Let me try and pick up on a couple of them before we wrap up quickly. Anti-fragile organizations, the ones that manage to survive the pressure of the bad times. strive to thrive, not survive. This whole concept, I guess, natural human nature to go into our shells and protect ourselves, but the opportunity, as Peter sees it, think big. We've got this huge opportunity for the industry, whilst all systems are being reset. And he kept coming back to the fact that he just felt that mass participation so central to what it means to be human. Think overall rather than individual, so not in our own individual pods, whether that be our organizations, our towns, how can we work as an industry on a much bigger level. Genuine collaboration will make us anti-fragile. And his point that backed that up was drawing together is the first sign of anti-fragile. And I've said it many times over the past few months. The level of collaboration I have seen in the last year, unprecedented. When I founded Mass Participation World in 2015, the platform was to promote collaboration and try and drive best practice. I would never have dreamed that within 5 years, and I take no credit for it, we would have had all these organizations sitting at the table together. Hopefully that is the start of building an anti-fragile industry. We are tribal, we need to be part of a herd, and mass participation is a classic example of that. We need to have an overall sense of identity, and mass participation gives a classic example of that. Rising tide rises all ships. We've said that one a number of times before. And that human beings have this absolute thirst to be together as a group. And again, mass participation is his exact words, I think, mass participation 100% aligned to what it means to be human. So the important other things is understanding what our value proposition, what are aspirational values for this sector, what are the guidelines and the rules that we're going to be putting in place as an overall industry to make sure that we continue to collaborate and rise the benefits. And then his final 3 points that he made: be at the very center, stop being a bolt-on to health and well-being or however we see ourselves, be at the very center of what it means to be human. Think big, not survival. And I love the one at the end. I thought that was really, really pertinent. Think of moving from individual heroes to tribes. Make the heroes towns, make the heroes schools, make the heroes groups. And I think we have an element of that, a foundation, but I think as an industry, we seldom really harness it on a broader scale. And then he ended up by saying, those that are best able to link value proposition with benefit are going to be the ones that are going to thrive at the end of this and come out the strongest. Before I hand back to Alessio to wrap up, I'd just like to give a quick thank you to all of our speakers today. I know probably most of them have had to drop off and go to other things with their busy diaries, but a very big thank you to John Ridgen, CEO of World Athletics, Mr. Lim Tek Yin, the CEO of Sports Singapore, Mark Hurst, the bidding manager of World Athletics, for his presentation, and of course remotely Peter Burrow and Caroline Darcy for all the effort that she made to try and join us. I'm just going to go through my notes quickly for those of you that might want to send some questions in regarding the bidding. mark.hurst@worldathletics.org or bidding@worldathletics.org. And I just want to acknowledge a message. There were a number of different questions and things. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time. What we do commit to do is have a look through those and try our best to respond to the group on some of those questions that we weren't able to address. The intention really was tonight for the Q&A to be around Mr. Lim Tek Yin, and we'll see what we can address. But Nigel Rowe had a great point there. We need to share this not with just the big races, the label races, the big organizations that might be on here, but with small and medium organizations who are a critical part of our industry. Certainly we endeavor to do that. For those of you that aren't part of Mass Participation World, come and join us there. I know we're collaborating more and more with World Athletics, and I thank Alessio for that opportunity. As I mentioned, we are recording this. We will make it available to you. Please feel free to share it far and wide. We will save it on the Mass Participation World YouTube channel. I think World Athletics will save it on their various platforms as well. So absolutely, it's all about collaboration. It's all about sharing these insights and working together to build anti-fragile and be bigger and stronger together. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to host you tonight. I look forward to seeing some of our MPW regulars. For those of you that may be interested, our first MPW web series of the year will be next Thursday night, Virtual Events 2.0. We've got a fantastic panel, but that's enough from me. Thanks so much for being with us. Over to you, Alessio, to wrap it up.
Well, Chris, I am an MPW regular myself, and I'm sure that Mark will become one too. I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart. This is a job, but it's also a passion for pretty much all of us here on the call. Not only for having done a spectacular job hosting us today, but also for the work that you've been putting in during the whole of the, well, for the past few years. But in reality, what you've done in the year of the pandemic has been incredibly important in keeping us connected, informed, and motivated. And to be honest, if World Athletics does these things, if we do these things in this department, the inspiration came from you. So kudos for that. The key word that you and other panelists today use is collaboration. This totally resonates with us, resonates with what World Athletics is trying to be more and more. You have noticed that these webinars started off as small-scale road race organizer sessions in which we were talking about rules and regulations issues that were very internal to World Athletics. But then we realized there was more and more appetite for information, for collaboration, for creating networks, and we thought of expanding it more and more. We will be expanding it furthermore. This is another thing for which we should thank you, Chris, for having allowed us to use your incredible network that brought up so many participants today. To be honest, today, it was the second time I saw Peter's presentation, but I thought, when I saw it for the first time, I thought it was so on point, and so the things that he was touching upon were so important for us as an industry that even if it was not possible to have him live today with us, I thought it was worth for everyone to enjoy this presentation and understanding these concepts that he mentioned. How good we are as a sector at articulating our water proposition. Well, World Athletics will help facilitate this global articulation as best as we can, as often as we can. World Athletics doesn't know better than anyone, really. What we have, our unique asset, is the ability to connect all the different players worldwide, National Athletic Association, race organizers, athlete representatives, professional athletes, as well as increasingly shoe manufacturers, vendors, the running industry at large, and we endeavor to do more of that in the coming months. We're going to have another webinar in 2-3 weeks from now, depending on how good we are at finding the speakers for the themes that we have in mind. It will always be along this line of optimism. The idea is to bring in some public health experts so that we can understand, we as the running industry can understand how to better articulate our proposition as an incredible tool of health promotion for governments worldwide. Stay tuned. You will be hearing from me per email, as well as from Chris on our LinkedIn profiles, Twitter profile, Facebook, and so on. From me and from Mark Hurst at World Athletics, it's a wrap. Thank you for joining. See you in a few weeks' time. Bye.